welcome to another episode with Dr. Shaun Matthews. And today, sadly, we're at the end of the trilogy of Unpacking Burnout. Together, we've been exploring the topic of burnout, going a bit deeper each time. And today's whole topic is all about a holistic approach to trauma healing, which has been spoken of in bits and pieces until now. Today, we're going to unpack that to help you see how burnout can happen and help you see how you can probably prevent it and develop a plan or a toolkit of experts, strategies, habits, rituals, and perhaps, herbal remedies to be able to support you on this journey of growth and, and all sorts of adventures that you're going to go on. So without further ado, I want to start by saying that the goal behind understanding the topic of preventing burnout or recovering from burnout is to help you think about how to start breaking the cycle, be it through small steps or be it through actually starting to take action, to talk to a practitioner that is experienced and has your interests at heart and give you that space to be able to plan for that. And Dr. Shaun is such person. He has a surgery in Sydney, Bondi, and he operates a holistic practice that combines Ayurveda and medical science. And he's a medical doctor as well. So he combines Eastern and Western perspective too, providing solutions. And he's well connected in the community with other holistic providers like psychotherapists as well as other therapists. So this is why we've been diving into this with him. And today we're going to go into holistic approach to trauma healing. Welcome back, Dr. Shaun.
Thank you. Thanks, Supriya. Nice to be here, as always.
Yes, great to have you back. So today, our topic, holistic approach to trauma healing. Shall we get started with understanding what it is? What is it that what we need to know? What is it that we need to know about trauma healing?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing to say is that, trauma is a word that gets thrown around a lot. Sometimes people think of it as like, I've had a traumatic day, I've had a stressful day. Actually, the way we're talking about trauma today, it's much more than that. And the way leaders in the field define it, one of the top researchers in the field of trauma and practitioners is a man by the name of Peter Levine in America. And he looks at it more like the debilitating symptoms from life-threatening or an experience that's overwhelming. So an experience that's life-threatening, it's perceived as life-threatening, or it's an experience that's overwhelming in some way. And that perception is quite interesting because, as we were talking off air, in the case of a child, for them just to be abandoned or left alone, they may experience that as, extremely traumatic, even though they're not necessarily a life-threatening experience, but the perception is that I'm left alone, what's going on, and feeling intensely fearful.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that so well. So we're looking at, some things that have happened way back in our early formative years. And now, even though the word trauma is so freely used, we need to be aware that the reaction we're having could be rooted somewhere back then, isn't it?
That's right. And, and in the field, they differentiate personal trauma that's affecting, your perception and experience of life. But that's often in a bigger context of your family and different generations. So now there's a lot of talk of intergenerational trauma. So that is trauma that's being passed down from your ancestors over many generations. And they also talk about collective trauma, which is the trauma that a whole society or a whole nation or a whole community can be carrying. And, the symptoms of that might be things like, war, sexism, racism, um, those kinds of things. So we live in that field, if you like,
Mm.
in a worldwide context where there's the consequences of trauma over many, many generations, that are influencing how the world functions at the moment. So that's that we talk about individual,
Yes.
familial or generational, intergenerational, as well as the overall context, which is like collective or trauma that's held within a culture. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I just was able to picture it so clearly. And it's almost like again, that's another dimension to our existence and experiences day to day. And I'll be honest, the reason why I felt we need to talk about this is because this is, there's so much personal development that we can do, but if we are not living it and speaking about it, we can't really educate the community, or we can't really be not just self-aware but socially aware of who's around us and how to better look after ourselves, right, together. Especially since there's like collective, like you said, ancestral as personal, so there's just so many dimensions to this, and it's all happening in us as well. So
Yeah, we're in that field.
yeah, the field. Yeah, so fascinating. And let's start off with, when you talk about the three, where do we start then? Where do we start when we want to look at this whole topic of trauma healing?
Yeah. Well, it's I might mention that some of the resources that I draw from, there's a rabbi in America, a woman by the name
Mhm.
of Tirza Firestone, and she has written a wonderful book on healing intergenerational Jewish trauma. And one of the points that she makes that oftentimes the beginning of the journey for an individual is to realize that I'm not okay. That's the first point. And then with that realization, they have to have the courage to actually go and get some kind of support, the best support that you can find, good support. But yeah, until you realize, if it's just same old, that's just how things are. I just put up with this, I put up with that. And then at a certain point, you come to the point where you think, no, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I need to do something different. I need to maybe I need to listen to my body, just to go back to some themes from our previous talk. I just listen to my body. I can't just override this pain that I'm getting, or some other behavior that is coming back to me. So okay, things are not okay. I'm not okay. Okay, that's a starting point for some self-discovery, a journey, getting support, and helping yourself.
That is so powerful. It's such a powerful thing for us to realize that it's so important for us to first admit and bring to the awareness that we're not okay. When you're not okay, you realize that there is this need, then only can you go seek the help you need. So powerful. Thank you. And when you talk about, we've talked about listening to the language of the body and understanding it. That was a really nice topic to go into. It's so relevant. When we're talking about this body, what is actually happening in the body? I know we've talked about understanding the language of the body, but when we talk about trauma healing, I know there's so many dimensions, like you mentioned, but from your, understanding, what can we start noticing in our body, or yeah, what should we be thinking of when we talk about the body?
Well, from my understanding and my reading on the subject, the key thing is that there is a fundamental level of disconnect from ourselves, from our bodies, from our families, from other people. And
Mm,
that disconnect is central to um, that experience of trauma. So in a sense, the pathway to healing is very much about connection with myself, with my body, with people around me, with society in general. Um, but that's a whole journey. You don't do that.
yeah,
It takes it has to be done in the right way. That's for that individual. It's a very individual journey, necessarily.
yeah. What are some of the stories you hear? If someone have people come to you and started talking about their story, what are some of the stories you hear from clients, and then you go, okay,
Mm.
this connection is, happening, and
Mm.
yeah, that that's a sign. I need to,
Well, oftentimes the sign in my medical practice, because
yeah.
I mainly practice as a holistic GP. I'm not a psychotherapist per se. So a lot of the people will come to me with debilitating symptoms,
Mm,
not fit into any medical model, um, and you know it might be affecting their sleep. It might be pain in parts of the body. They might be having sometimes they might be having flashbacks. They're just not coping. They can't concentrate. They're not functioning well at work. I remember one woman who came to see me many years ago who was a policewoman who was getting a lot of bullying in the workplace, and she worked in a very special part of the police force. That the work was very stressful as well.
mhm.
So she had the stress of the workplace, and then she had bullying from some of her, co-workers and superiors. And so that had a huge toll on her physical, emotional, mental health. And so those physical symptoms were probably what brought her. But as I talked to her more, a much bigger holistic picture emerged of the kind of trauma that she was experiencing.
Yeah, wow. And
Very debilitating.
debilitating, you said?
Yeah, yeah. She had to take
Mm.
quite a lot of time off work, and it was all very complicated because she was part of a bigger organization, and how are you able to take time off work or not? Yeah.
Well, in our community of clients, in my also experience, what I have noticed is it often happens through our workplace, where we meet our limitations. Well,
Mm,
I'm speaking from what I've experienced in my clients. They'll be challenged by many things all at the same time, and the recurring theme is overwhelm.
mm,
And like you mentioned, sleep problems, appetite problems, or things of that nature, where easily tripped up.
mm. Yeah,
But
very
then
reactive.
you notice that the whole workplace that surrounds them is also not helping. And like that policewoman you just mentioned. Um, yeah, so I guess the point of asking that is, it's it seems that there's this external environment that contributes, or
Mm.
can contribute to our uh, pre-existing or existing experiences that have not been looked at. Is that what we're saying, that we're finding it more overwhelming because of the early childhood impressions, or
Mm.
intergenerational, or or societal, or collective trauma that's contributing to our overwhelm and our
Yeah,
symptoms?
so in that situation, it may be the case, or it may be the case where something in our present experience, and it could be something as simple as somebody shouting at you, with
Yeah.
angrily shouting at you about, maybe you took their parking spot or whatever it happened to be.
Yeah.
But if you've had an experience in the past where in your family, or where somebody shouted at you and you're a little kid and you're just getting completely overwhelmed,
Yeah.
so that trauma from the past, and might have been an ongoing experience, will get triggered by somebody shouting at you. Now, somebody else might just shout back and it's no big deal, but for you, given your history, that's going to be triggered, and that old trauma starts to get reactivated, so to speak, which has some kind of link with the present. Yeah.
Yes. So what's the perspective we can take on this, So yes, I'm not okay. And how else can I understand, like how else can they understand themselves
Mm.
when they're experiencing this sort of reaction? Because we can't control our environment. But the only thing we can control is what's happening within. How can we better understand this from a holistic point of view that you were sharing with me earlier? What is Ayurveda and what does the system say about this? What is actually happening?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting from an Ayurvedic perspective. Ayurveda brings in this idea of what's called ama. That's AMA.
Yeah.
And ama, in a sense, is at a physical level, it's undigested food that goes into various tissues in the body and creates disease. So in Ayurvedic texts written before the Bible, they say that ama is the root of all disease, which is undigested food. But it's a mind-body principle. So ama is actually also undigested experience. So it exists at both levels. So you might have a very traumatic experience that's overwhelming and potentially life-threatening. I had one patient of mine who was a young man. He was traveling the world. He was in Africa. And one day he got up and just went for a walk, and he walked through like a poor part of a big city. And a local man came up to him and held a gun to his head and just said, "Give me all your money." And, that was a pretty traumatic experience for him, just out of the blue. And so he had to get some support and do some work, get good support from a psychotherapist who had experience in treating this sort of thing, and get support and healing because, it had a big impact on him. So yeah, we try and take a holistic perspective, and that might involve, well, it will involve finding healthcare professionals with skills in this, psychotherapists of various kinds, and also, there are. Well, one of the findings that just comes through all of the research is that, having good support is the single most important factor in moving through trauma. Finding good support, finding safe people. If you've been in a situation of terror, you need to find safe people. So that obviously, if your friends and family are safe and they're understanding and supportive, that's very important. But also having professionals who can help you work with it, who are safe. So you have a safe place where you can go, which can help you to integrate the experience rather than for it to remain undigested and as something that is traumatic.
Yeah, I have to I can relate this to how it shows up in some of our clients. I mean, most of new entrepreneurs in this service-based industry, what I've noticed is, once you've finished your qualifications, you go into serving people, and it's a journey that's always up and down, and you're learning through mistakes, and you're learning through your experiences. They may be good or bad or negative or positive, and they do bring up all sorts of unprocessed
Mm.
feelings, emotions, and thoughts, beliefs.
Mm.
And some of the work that we do with our clients is to help them see and become aware of these limiting beliefs, where they're coming from, from these early developmental years of where these fearful thoughts come from, and then how they come into now as an adult, as we're trying to build a brand new life or business or sort of something that you're building. And yeah, all sorts of challenges bring up these thoughts, and debilitating thoughts, which sometimes some people quit, want to quit, like even if they've made it for a long time, they just can't take it anymore. So
Yeah.
I can see how the perspective of not processing what has happened in the past, and that coming up and blocking the perspective of how to move forward, can be such a debilitating experience for so many. I myself personally have done that work myself. So what has helped?
And sorry, just to come in on that point. So as you start to develop more self-awareness about your internal world and your feelings about, in reaction to difficulties that may have come your way, as you say, in trying to move into being a successful entrepreneur and in the workplace and in business. So when those feelings start to come up, and some of those feelings, there might be a lot of anxiety or fear or frustration or whatever it happens to be, dread, it's very powerful in the recovery to start seeing those things just as feelings and not to automatically react to them. An automatic reaction, like it might be like, I'm crap at this, I'm out of here. It might be, oh, okay, so I'm feeling a little bit insecure here, or I'm feeling there's a bit of anxiety. I feel maybe this is triggering me. I'm not measuring up to the sort of things that that I would like to be.
Yeah.
So then what happens is, rather than getting a reactive response, then you can look at it with curiosity and have a more reflective response. But that is much more easy to do when you've got really good support. So that person is supporting you in developing this way of looking at your own internal experience, and then seeing that you actually have some choice rather than, so once you experience and have choice, well, I may not do it. I may not do this, but I might just do that, or I might do this, but I'll do it in a different way. And so with that choice, that's essentially empowering to the individual and helps them to navigate and move forward.
Yes, beautifully said. And another example that I can think of, just 2 months ago, mentee was sharing how she had a very successful workshop. And then from that workshop, I believe she got such a tremendous, feedback that internally she said, well, I don't know enough to be able to continue this. Even though that's a positive experience, her internal dialogue was, oh my God, I don't know enough. I can't do this again. I've got to learn more. And so she started to sort of hold herself back, instead of seeking, like you said, let's not react to whether it's positive or negative. Let's take a moment and see that there's a reaction happening internally, and then bring that awareness to the next step, which is, finding a more resourceful way to respond to something that, that's happening externally. But internal dialogue is such an important part of, noticing that, this is a trauma response, not,
Mm.
yeah, not.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to come in on that again, the other thing that comes out of the work done in the sphere is the power of working with the body, working with the breath, and learning to quieten and stabilize the mind. So when the mind's more stable, maybe you've done some breath work, some breathing, or some type of pranayama practice, and maybe you've got your prana moving through some gentle yoga, and then you can actually be in a better place to witness the strength of these internal reactions rather than just feel overwhelmed by them. And so approaches that work with the body and the breath, and I guess a much more mindful approach, mindfulness. And I should say that I actually had the experience many years ago of watching a theatre production that was put on um, as a kind of educational process by the Australian Defence Forces. And it was about the journey of a soldier who goes to Afghanistan and then comes back, and the challenges they face coming back with violence and addictions and
Mm.
depression and suicidality. And at the end of the theatre production, the people sitting next to us, the woman stood up, and we all gave them a standing ovation, because the people who were acting were not just actors, they were also soldiers. They're actually soldiers who were acting out these parts on stage. And it
Mm.
turned out that her partner was one of the lead actors. Anyway, long story short, I got to know his best friend, who had done several tours to Afghanistan. And he was now doing a degree in mindfulness, because
Mhm.
it helped him so much with his PTSD after going to Afghanistan. And he wanted to bring those skills and help his fellow soldiers in terms of helping them to integrate back into the non-military kind of world.
Society, yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that where iRest also, the founder of iRest, the modern yoga nidra? Have you heard of what iRest is? The method of iRest.
I haven't heard that word, but I'm very familiar, and certainly teach a lot of yoga nidra,
Yoga
but
nidra, yes.
it's very, very powerful
Yeah,
practice to help as you say, to help develop that witnessing
yeah,
of what's coming up,
yeah,
rather than getting caught up in it and feeling overwhelmed by it.
yes. Yeah, so there was, I don't know exactly the specifics, though the founder of iRest, which is a small I and a big REST, iRest is patented yoga nidra by an American ex-military or someone that served in the military. And they came up with this strategy to teach and equip people that have, PTSD or that do suffer from, uh, unaddressed trauma, I guess, and as a skill set to relax and become aware and,
Mm.
self-aware and have the benefits of yoga nidra. Yeah.
And just in terms of resources for listeners,
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate to hear Bessel van der Kolk, who's one of the original pioneers in the field of the treatment of PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And he's basically run the trauma center in Boston in the States for the last 40 years. He's a professor at the local medical school. I think it's Boston Medical School. And he's written this amazing book, which I'll just share here. It's called The Body Keeps
Oh,
the Score
yes.
by Bessel van der Kolk.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually originally born in Holland, immigrated to the States, and his original work was with Vietnam vets. And so he's very open. He's embraced a lot of complementary methods, including yoga therapy, EMDR, tapping, mindfulness also from John Kabat-Zinn, who did a lot of work with pain patients using meditation practices,
Mm.
and really brought mindfulness to a larger context. And you can now do mindfulness-based stress reduction trainings all over the world, including in Australia. So those two men have certainly been at the forefront of much more contemporary approaches to working with PTSD. But originally it started with people who'd come from Vietnam, and they were just finding what they were offering was just inadequate. So that started a much bigger inquiry into new and more contemporary, as well as using ancient practices, various types of yoga, meditation, pranayama in supporting people.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that book is so famous. I haven't got it yet, but I'm definitely going to get it. Yes.
Yeah, and easy to read. Lots of stories, lots of examples in it. It's got it's really. I think it's really well written.
Thank you. So just a couple more points. What would it look like? I know you said it's a person to person again, and since we've been unpacking burnout, the first thing we talked about is what is burnout, how does it show up? And we're generally speaking to women that are women or men. This is a human body after all, but women is your area of expertise, and they're more prone to getting burnt out because they're primary caregivers to family and everything else. And then we talked about understanding the body's language, which is, looking at it from a perspective of developing a space, to be able to embrace that intuitive nature that we've got. We've got that faculty available. And also this holistic approach to trauma, understanding that we are all subject to carrying unprocessed experiences, because it's never ending, isn't it? As long as this body is there, we're going to have unprocessed things that will come up in our awareness, especially through special circumstances. I mean, we talked about war vets, but in a general sense, we haven't gone to war, though we may have experienced stuff in our childhood that may come up. So in a general sense, I mean...
And Supriya, just to say that when I heard Bessel talk many years ago, he talked about, overt trauma, such as in a war situation or an earthquake or, flooding. But he also talked about covert trauma, which is much more common, which happens in families, whether there's some kind of abuse taking place, or there might be domestic violence, or various things. That's covert trauma. That's much more common. And just to go back to what we talked about in our other podcasts, this idea that we are carrying this. I use the word from a yogic perspective, ancestral karma, or we're carrying intergenerational trauma that is, we are the carriers of. And it's in these traditions, it's sort of often held in your whole body, your whole being, but it can often express through the physical body as, symptoms of some kind. And when I talked previously about undigested experience, or what we know as ama in Ayurveda, so that ama can create various kinds of mental or physical illness. So, taking a holistic approach, because the roots of the problem are in these deeper aspects, if you like, of the unconscious, or held in the body, or held, and the modern research is showing that the trauma that we're carrying, the intergenerational trauma, can express itself through epigenetic modifications, which is basically saying that our genes, which we're carrying in a gene pool, they can be switched on or off depending on the environment. And so if you have a certain kind of environment, which is very harsh or punitive or traumatic, that could switch on a particular gene. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think modern science is really starting to uh, understand better trauma, even though it's been held in a lot of these ancient traditions, and there's been a language of describing it in these ancient
Yes.
for a long time, obviously.
Yes, I love that topic of epigenetics. It's so empowering to actually, I thought of it after we had our first chat on unpacking burnout, as soon as you started sharing about,
Mm.
the way it manifests. And yeah, so the way we break the cycle is through this understanding that we can actually water the seeds or we can not water the seeds of what's been passed on covertly or intergenerationally, but we have to have awareness. I feel like the key thing I'm hearing and taking away from our chat is,
Mm.
first of all, is awareness. And hopefully this conversation with you is helping lots of people become aware of this, because it's not spoken of enough. And that's why I'm really passionate about just opening the box and then continuing the conversation wherever we go. So, yeah, as I was saying,
I just want to come in one little point on this, that, you know, in the recovery, there's a certain point where you take action. That might be taking action to get some help. It might be, there's a case given in one of the books of a woman who'd lost her son. Um, he was in the Israeli army and he got killed. And she listening to her intuition, she realized she just couldn't go back to her normal work. She needed to take some time for herself. And she organized with the family just to go and live in London for 3 months. And she just worked there and saw London, enjoyed London, had a lot of time for herself. And she ended up going to this Oxfam shop and just helping out there, and became friends with the whole community. Anyway, she went back to Israel, back to her family, and she ended up opening up a charity shop. And that became a vehicle for her self-expression and a whole new community. So this whole new community for her was very healing. And that action, as another action that she took, she listened to her intuition, coming back to intuition. She took that action, and a lot of healing came out of that. So the other thing that comes through in the research is that the whole process, and that you start to move into getting support, um, finding new communities, taking action, then there's a whole search for a broader meaning in life that can come out of that as well. So people go on a kind of a journey of growth and spiritual growth and understanding through the experience of trauma. So they're not caught up in that sort of like a victim. Oh, this has happened to me. It's like this was the catalyst for a transformation that started to unfold in my life that I could never have even imagined. So that also came through that as one of the, towards the, if you like, the last stage of healing, that this action starts taking place, and this whole search for a bigger meaning and the kind of satisfaction that comes with that, and contentment.
so what I'm hearing is, you just said, and thank you for so much for sharing that story. I think it's very helpful in the sense that we've been talking about approaching trauma healing. Is there like an end to it? What are you referring to there? I mean, what is the process in your perspective, trauma healing?
I mean, I guess you can say a difficult life experience.
Mm,
And it's interesting in Ayurveda, we talk about, say, somebody had a very difficult divorce, a
yeah.
very acrimonious divorce, and afterwards they felt bitter about it, or it left a sour taste in their mouth. And that may contribute to some kind of ama, or ama meaning some kind of undigested experience where it affects one's attitude. Maybe you become a lot less generous, or maybe you become a bit
Jaded.
self-esteem, or you become a bit jaundiced or jaded. Or you can go, oh, okay, how did I contribute to this? Like, what was my part in this? Maybe I need to look at myself and get some support and understand better why my marriage failed, for example. Go and see a psychotherapist, or or a wise person, and do some reading. And then you start to think, oh, maybe I was inadvertently contributing this. Maybe I'm carrying some kind of trauma from the past, intergenerational trauma, that maybe contributed this in some kind of way. And as you start to get more of a handle on that, your worldview starts to change. You're actually seeing life differently. You're probably maybe going to move into having different friends, or different interests or pursuits, or maybe you'll have a career change. And so this whole unfolding path, moves forward, which can support your growth going forwards. It's not like whatever happened. I mean, the fact is, you went through a painful divorce. That's but your kind of view of it, rather than feeling like a victim of it, like, how did that happen? He's such a horrible person, or whatever it is that you think about them. And I'm not trying to justify what they did, but it's your reaction. You have control over that. You can choose how you react to if you like, the suffering or the pain that you went through. And so that can be a journey towards, let's say, growth, transformation, that happened because of that. And I guess as a doctor, I see people going through incredible journeys of healing through serious illness. In fact, my first book, the initial title before I gave it to the publisher, was The Gift of Illness. Not an easy gift, a very hard gift. Some of the people could have died. They had cancer, they had HIV positive, psychotic breakdown. But somehow they were able to resource themselves, find new communities, grow through the experience, and come out the other side as a wiser, more mature, more fulfilled human being, who can then actually share that wisdom with other people. And some of the books in this in this field, one of them by Gabor Mate, is called The Wisdom of Trauma. So that if you work with it in the ways that we've talked about, then it can actually be something that's incredibly empowering, and makes you into a different person, a happier, more content person, and a wiser person.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is there's no end to it. The journey does need to start, and it can continue enriching us if we dare to ask more productive questions. Instead of saying, why me? We can say, what is this teaching me about me? Or
just simply, how did this happen? Take it away from the individual. If I really am carrying a lot of unconscious trauma from previous generations, and that's going to manifest in some way, shape, or form in this lifetime.
Yep.
Then, is that mine? Is that me?
Yes.
Can I really be responsible for all of the unconscious material that I'm carrying? So
yes.
There's no sense of blame. It's like,
yes.
It's what happened. I can't deny that it happened. It happened, and then it's like, well, I as an individual, I have the means to choose how I respond to that experience. And it, probably you could say it's some kind of suffering, whether it's disease or a relationship breakdown, or a traumatic experience in the workplace, whatever. I can choose how I react to that, and then make, as you were saying, different decisions, and get support, and something else can start to unfold in my life.
Yeah, and what came to mind when you were sharing that also is looking at which area of your life you're looking at as well. Being objective is not natural when you are triggered, quote
Absolutely.
unquote, by the situation. Um,
It's impossible in that moment. It's impossible in that moment.
Yeah, and that's the kind of, that's the kind of work we help people do. And you need support to move through it, or else it does stay unprocessed and gets put in the later box until another something happens. I heard someone say, I mean, they said the word God, but then they said they use the metaphor of God will throw you first a pebble, then they'll throw you a rock, and then they'll throw you a boulder to
Mm.
help you realize
Yeah.
how blessed you really are, So,
Yeah.
um,
And I guess one last thing I would say, and this is very much held in the tradition of Ayurveda, they say the first pillar of health for all of us, and we're all carrying ancestral trauma of one shape or another,
or karma. Let's
or
just call it
karma,
karma now.
ancestral karma, uh, is to, it's called swastavrita in Sanskrit. It means to establish yourself in healthy habits. So practices of self-care that you do every day. Another way that's described in the yogic texts is your personal sardhana. So that might be spiritual practices that you do every day that help keep you on track, help keep you nourished. It might be inquiry, it could be through reading, it could be through meditation practices. Everybody does it differently. But
Hmm.
those daily practices help embed in you that ongoing process of transformation in the right direction.
That is really, really powerful because, as you said earlier, that, we need to have some sort of a baseline to compare to what's not right and what's not feeling right, right? So if we're not doing that, we're not establishing ourselves in good habits, good self-care routines, then we may never know when it's not all right. So that's a really good tip. Thank you. So, what else can we talk about this topic that we haven't talked about yet to wrap up this chat about holistic approach to trauma healing?
Um, One of the things that personally has struck me is that so many of the approaches that have come to light in the last, say, 40 years are engaging the body. So whether it's a mindfulness practice where you're tuning into your whole body, and in Ayurveda we say the body is wise, or it might be through movement. In one of the some of the in one of the books that I was reading, they talked about the power of a community that had been just ravaged. It was in South Africa, and a lot of the women had been raped, and they'd come together for healing, and everybody was incredibly downcast and frozen. And then one woman just got up and they started to dance and they started to sing, and the whole energy of the group transformed through movement and through dance and singing. So, the movement engaged the body. So body-oriented approaches, whether it's through yoga, working with the breath, the eye rest, yoga nidra meditation, dance, chanting, singing, um, even having craniosacral or therapeutic massage, osteopathic work, really working with the body. In the somatic tradition, in Ayurveda yoga, we say the body is a map of the unconscious. So if you want to work with it, then these body-oriented approaches really make a lot of sense. And they're starting to be more and more supported by pioneers in the field of treating trauma. So for me, as somebody who'd gone down that track, it was very affirming to see that that these researchers were also, even tapping.
Mm-hmm.
So just this focus on the body as an important part of the healing journey.
Mm. That's wonderful. Yes, I love that you will bring it back to something that we can have. It's so tangible. The body is a tangible way to get started, and yeah, it's really great and powerful. So we've talked about everything now, right? So let's talk about the whole topic of unpacking burnout. Do you feel like we have left any parts unexplored or anything else that's coming up for you? I mean, I know there's so much more to be said. From the beginning, you said burnout, Supriya, is a big topic. Again, all three of these chats that we've had are so vast, and there's so many studies that are being done currently and that have been done. By all means, we haven't gone as deep as we could have due to time constraints. And also, we're just starting the conversation here. Is there anything that's coming up in your awareness that we could park it maybe for another day, or any topics that we haven't touched on that the listeners could go in and look into other than these podcasts on the topic of burnout?
Mm, mm. I mean, yeah, I think, we haven't had a lot of time, but we've certainly given it a good go.
Yeah.
Probably it would be being a bit more specific. For example, like in this book by Tears of Firestone, she talks about the 7 stages of healing intergenerational trauma. I mean, the thing is, with intergenerational trauma, you're carrying it, but it may not be very obvious to that you're carrying it. You might just think, for example, yeah, because it was reinforced in your family or in your culture, or your personal experience, I just can't trust people. I just can't trust them. People are not trustworthy. And that's just like, you're just like the fish in water. That's just the truth.
Mm.
You might go through your whole life holding that attitude, conscious, unconscious attitude about life.
Yeah.
And it's not until that attitude somehow gets questioned that you can open up to a different view of the world. And you may have the experience, oh, okay, well, I have met a few people who I felt were quite trustworthy. But in order to get to that place, you may have to sort of question the underlying attitude that you've been holding, so.
And that alone is a very tiring life to live. Having that perspective on your surroundings can be so tiring. Just to have to fight everybody on your journey, considering you don't trust anyone.
Yeah, well, it's a pathway to probably feeling fairly isolated.
Mm.
So, but in a sense, we're all carrying some kind of attitude.
Yes.
It's just that when the attitudes are limiting
Mm-hmm.
or potentially self-destructive, if you really don't like yourself, then you're going to start, indulging in self-destructive, activities. It might be, some kind of addiction or self-harm, or, various ways in which you can not look after yourself. And yeah, I guess all of these things can be a pathway to self-love and self-acceptance. But, something has to trigger that journey, otherwise you might go through your whole life, as I'm sure many millions of people have done, that's, life is, life wasn't meant to be, it wasn't meant to be easy. Life is tough. And then you die. It's fairly bleak.
Yeah.
And that's just, in a lot of ways, you could say that's just a testimony to the ancestral karma that person is carrying, which never got questioned. So that's where you could say, to have something that, it could be a relationship breakdown. It could be a very serious disease. It takes you deeper into the inquiry, and you start questioning things. And then as you maybe see the limitations, or you actually see what it is, you discover the attitude that you're carrying Then once that's been discovered, then you can open up to another attitude, something different, something else can emerge, which might be incredibly life-giving and invigorating.
Women have suffered from this from a while, so I can understand what you're saying. From a woman's perspective, there's many biases we have, and also there's so many passed on belief systems and uh, you know anything that you look at about women, how we've evolved. It hasn't been that long that our roles have changed in society, collective. So we won't go into that now. But as you said, yeah, that's a great topic to specify what sort of trauma there is. I'd say yes, one of those things we could go deeper into.
Mm.
Um, Okay, well, thank you so much for giving us all your knowledge and pouring into our community, your understanding of, the holistic nature of these things that we're dealing with. Um, with regards to the kind of work you're doing, what do you want the listeners to know about you, and what can they do to start working with you? I know I've mentioned it. I have mentioned your books in the first episode. I'll link them down below. You've got your website that they can contact you on. But if you wanted to just let the listener know how to start working with you and how to connect with you, please share.
Sure. So I have my medical practice, which is actually in Bondi Junction at Bondi Road Doctors. I'm there twice a week. All my consults go for an hour. And, I work largely with physical illnesses. Sometimes I'm going to be working more with mental problems, anxiety, depression, but probably the vast majority have something more physical. Could be irritable bowel, it could be high blood pressure, it could be whatever. And, I'm bringing together my understanding as a medical doctor, but also using Ayurveda and yoga approaches to well-being and supporting good health. And I also teach at Nature Care College, actually running a course that will start next year in March in Ayurveda as a science of self-healing. It's called Living in Tune with Your Ayurvedic Body Type. To register for that, you just go to the Nature Care College website. In the second term, I'm actually going to run a 10-week course called Understanding the Language of Your Body. So that's going to give people the tools to better understand how their bodies are speaking, or how the body is speaking its mind. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of ways. And obviously, if they're interested in getting a book, I will be making my last book, The Art of Balanced Living, available as an audio book. That'll take place probably in January. It's already been recorded. I just need to upload it onto to Audible. So there are, a few different ways in which, if they're interested to work with me, how it's possible.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Shaun. I've really enjoyed speaking and learning from you and all the tools and strategies you've shared with us. I feel like I've gone away with a lot of things that I've learned as well, looking at unpacking burnout in a holistic and practical way. And thank you for also making it so easy for us to look at these taboo topics. These topics aren't really common party topics, so everyone's more focused on, what did you do, what are you doing, and all externalized. And we really appreciate you normalizing and giving us a language to think about our internal world with.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. When I first graduated as a doctor, PTSD was pretty new. And, medical students would have known about it, and doctors, but wasn't really that much talked about. Whereas now it's just part of our language. It's part of our lexicon. And people are starting to understand it better and how it relates, like if we look at what happens for people in the military, not just in the military, but also in a domestic situation. PTSD is pretty much here to stay. It's like yoga. It's just been
Yes, it's here to
to our
stay.
culture. And I think that process will just continue to evolve, and there'll be more and more understanding. And what we've talked about today will become more commonly talked about and understood as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I'll wrap up the call here in gratitude, and also very appreciative of all the time and care you've given to our chats. And we'll definitely invite you back again when you are free to discuss other topics that you love talking about. We love your passion and your dedication to helping others, have good health and understand themselves in a more holistic way. So thank you, Dr. Shaun, for today's chat. And for our listeners, when you have finished listening to this powerful talk on approaching trauma healing in a holistic way, do let us know what you thought. What is your perspective on this topic, and what did you take away? What did you love? What did you enjoy from hearing this and what we've been talking about? We'd love to hear what you thought, and do stay in touch with Dr. Shaun and myself. All right, well, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back with another episode next week.
Thanks, Supriya. And yeah, I've got to say it's been a really enlightening journey for me as well to put together these podcasts with your excellent help. So thank you very much.
Oh, really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shaun.